everyone. I'm Lynn Kapusinski. Welcome to my talk on what your children need most from you now. I'm so glad you're here. I'm a licensed counselor with over 10 years of experience in working with divorced families. I'm also a Catholic child of divorce who was fortunate to beat the odds. And I say that because I've been happily married since 2001 and have never been divorced. However, getting to this point was not at all easy. My parents did some things that helped my healing in profound ways. They instilled in me a love for the Catholic faith and reinforced the importance of attending Mass, receiving the sacraments, and praying. However, they inadvertently did other things that jeopardized my healing considerably. Just to share with you a little bit about my story, my dad moved out of our home when I was 11, and shortly after that, he moved across country. And every time I would mention to my mother that I was missing him, she would remind me that other children had it worse than I did. And she was absolutely right. And she also had very good intentions in trying to talk me out of my grief. However, because she didn't know better ways to help me and didn't have support for her own healing, she responded in very harmful ways. The lecturing and the reprimanding sent me the message that I was wrong and weak for having sad feelings, so I repressed them. And as a result, my grief stayed unresolved. My dad also didn't know better ways to help me, nor did he have support for his grieving. So as a result, he responded in harmful ways as well. Growing up, I would visit him a couple times a year, and each time I would visit, he would confide in me his difficulties and being married to my mom and whatever personal struggles he was having at the time. But he shared with me as if I was his therapist. More than anything, I wanted to be close to him, so I always listened and tried to support him as best I could. However, as a child and a teenager, I lacked the maturity to be his confidant. And this role also postponed my healing because I was more focused on his feelings instead of my own. This is why it's so important to learn how to help support your child's healing, because otherwise your child is likely to cope in unhealthy ways, and those patterns can easily become ingrained and more difficult to remedy as your child gets older. Early intervention is so critical, not only so children can be healthier emotionally, but also so they don't enter their vocations with that unresolved grief. And in the case of marriage, that unresolved grief is going to put them at higher risk for divorce. An analogy of an airbag helps to illustrate this really well. Divorce or separation is like being in that car collision. The airbags are set off, and that's similar to our psychological defenses that absorb the shock of the loss. Now, those defenses are necessary as children adjust to this difficult reality. However, defenses like airbags eventually need to be deflated and put back into place so one can drive the car forward. So it's your constructive response to your child's grief that's going to allow her to put that airbag back into place more readily and in a healthy way. In addition to helping your child heal, learning constructive helping strategies can also bring you and your child a lot closer. And you're also going to have that reassurance of knowing you did the best you could to help him. This in turn is going to lead to growth. And yes, there is research out there that says that children can turn divorce into a growth opportunity, can become more mature, more empathetic, and have higher self-esteem than their peers. So before we move on to a couple techniques that you can use to help your child's healing, I want to talk a little bit about the nature of your child's grief and your child's task with respect to it. You are grieving the death of your marriage, even if you wanted the divorce. However, your child's task is the exact opposite. He continues to need as close a relationship as possible with his other parent as well as you. You are disengaging emotionally, however, your child is trying to stay engaged with both you and his other parent. That's a really difficult task, especially given the unclear nature of divorce losses for children. Children generally don't experience these losses as final. That's because for them, while something is lost, something is also still there. For example, my dad moved out of our home and eventually moved across country, so I saw him a lot less. Then he became bogged down with some personal difficulties, which took his attention further away from me. However, my dad remained my dad, and I was very confused in understanding what that role now meant and what I could expect from him. So when losses lack clarity like this, children cannot grieve them. Instead, they often slip into denial and tell themselves, well, the loss isn't really a loss, or it's going to improve in time. So when I was a child, I told myself that, well, Dad just needed more time to kind of get on his own 2 feet, and then he's going to be more involved in my life. And when that didn't happen, I blamed myself. And I bought into the notion that my dad was not paying more attention to me because, unlike him, I hadn't achieved anything great. So I embraced a pattern of overachieving, and that kept me stuck in denial for years. Children need adult help in moving through divorce grief, and as their parent, you are going to impact them the most. There are some helping strategies that are very easy to learn that you can use to help your child in this regard. These strategies are designed to help you show empathy and focus on your child's inside story so he can gain clarity on those losses and as a result, grieve them. One technique is called restatements. Restatements are a paraphrasing of the substance, the content, or the meaning of what your child has said. They typically contain fewer but similar words, and they're clearer than what your child has said. For example, suppose your teenage daughter says to you, I keep trying not to argue with Mom so much. I bite my tongue, I change the subject, I even leave the room, but nothing seems to work. Well, a helpful restatement would be, well, so despite all your efforts, progress is slow, if at all. When you've restated their words well, children will respond very positively. They'll usually say, yeah, that's exactly right, or they're not, or maybe they'll get an animated look on their face. Mirroring feelings is also another way to show empathy. This is similar to a restatement, except the emphasis is on feelings. These feelings may have been stated by your child, or you might be able to infer them based on the nonverbals or the content of what your child has been what you've been told. So for example, suppose your son says to you, I just hate going to Dad's, his girlfriend is always there, and even if we go out to run an errand, she always has to tag along, she's always listening to our conversations. So you could say in response to that, I can hear how unhappy you are about your dad's girlfriend. It sounds like you would wish he would spend time with just you alone. So when using these techniques, you also want to check for accuracy, especially when feeding back a long communication from your child. For example, simply asking your child, do I understand you properly? Or saying, so what I think I hear you saying is X, am I getting that right? This is going to assure your child that you've heard what he said, and it ensures that you understood what he has said. Above all, remember to be patient. It can take several tries or more before your child really responds to these techniques, and that's okay. What's most important is that you're helping your child become immersed in her inner experiences and essentially embrace her cross. So in closing, I really want you to know that it is realistic to have hope in your child's ability to carry the cross of divorce and grow from it. There's definitely light and new life along the way if, in addition to using these strategies, you help your child bring faith, the sacraments, and the wisdom of church teachings into the healing solution. Helping children heal definitely is an incredibly challenging job, but remember, the good news is that you are going to impact your child's healing the most. So I encourage you to use your special role to make that positive difference. And remember that God's grace and love is always there and is always going to prevail. Again, thank you so much for joining me, and I wish you many blessings on this journey.